America's healthcare advocate, CARY Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. My producers today, Mr. Garner Cowdery, behind the microphones, and Dave Thiessen behind the cameras, as always. I'm CARY Hall, the host of America's Healthcare Advocate. Thank you for joining us today and making us one of the most listened to talk shows across the country. And you know that you can always go up on our website or on our YouTube channel and the 16 podcast channels to listen to these shows if you miss one or you want to listen to it during the week. So they're up there. So joining me in studio today, this is a show that I wanted to do for a couple of months now because of what we see coming. And the show today is going to focus on ACA. We're going to talk a little bit about small group too, but primarily what's going to happen with the ACA plans as we get close to open enrollment. So I'm going to share a little something with everybody. These are some predicted increase numbers in states that we're in around the Midwest here. I've got the whole list of all 50 states, but let me give you an example here. Kentucky's looking at a 29% increase. Indiana's looking at a 26% increase. Illinois, 29%. Kansas, on average, is 30%. Joining me in studio now, Misty Snodgrass. It's going to be a big disruptive year for ACA. And by the way, Misty is the director of ACA and Medicaid for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, and she's here today to talk to us about that and what they are doing to try to help people in terms of containing costs and getting them across the board. So that it's shocking. I haven't seen numbers like this. I can't even remember the last time I saw numbers like this.
No, this is unprecedented. Thanks so much for having me, and to your listeners, I'm really appreciative to be here to help educate on what's going on. But yeah, these numbers are unprecedented. We're doing our best to hold the rates down. We are going to be taking, a hit financially, but we want to make sure that people have access to coverage. And so we are working really hard to help improve health outcomes here at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas. But yeah, these rates they're unprecedented, and we've not seen anything like it.
Yeah. Now, I will say this. That level of increase does not apply to the Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans, but it certainly applies to a whole host of other carriers I've seen out there. And on top of that, to cause more confusion and disruption in the marketplace, Aetna's leaving, and 1 million people across the country are losing their coverage. Yeah. So it's going to be a very disruptive year. And I think what I'm trying to do with these kinds of shows, and thank you for being here because you're truly an expert at this, is tell people what they need to do to get ready. Yeah. Don't wait until...
No.
Because, as I told you, I'm a 27-year recovering broker. And when I had benefits by design, we would talk about this, starting now, throughout up until we get to the open enrollment period, and it never failed. People procrastinated and waited, and then they're all trying to get in at the same time, and it's very, very difficult. It can cause a lot of frustration, all the rest of it. So it's far better to be proactive right now. So what are you telling people? If they want to call you and consult, what are you telling people?
Yeah, no, Misty? I think that's a great question. I think this year is different than even the last few years, which have been a lot of changes. And so, first of all, open enrollment for this year is going to go until January 15th. Next year, that's changing, so just be prepared. But, get in early. Start looking at the plans. Start looking at the prices. Go to healthcare.gov. Go to our website, BlueCrossBlueShieldOfKansas.com, and start to look and see what the prices are going to be and the impact to you, because you're able to plug in what prescription drugs you're using, what providers you're using, and start to see what the price impact is going to be to you, because it is going to be felt by the majority of Americans.
But if they call you guys and they just want to talk to somebody, this is where
that's different.
This is where you're different than what I call the conglomerate carriers, okay? Because your customer service is right there in Topeka. Yep. It's Kansas helping Kansas. You've won multiple awards for customer service because people can actually call and talk to somebody, okay? And you can also do that with your local broker. Obviously, if you've got a broker you've used and he's helped you or she's helped you, that's what you should do. As long as you can get in touch with them, do it. But otherwise, they can call you just to talk to you and get an understanding of, okay, what do I need to be concerned about? What's my plan going to look like here? I'm one of those people that had the Aetna plan. I'm losing my coverage, or I'm one of those people that just found out I got my renewal letter and I'm at a 27% increase.
Yes.
All right. So talk a little bit.
Yeah, happy to do it. We love our customer service team. They're actually part of the team I'm on, so we're able to work with them, and they're fantastic. They want to talk to our members. They're not trying to get you off the phone. They are locally based in Kansas. They're able to answer any questions even about your claims or your billing or what you may have and what different kind of products that are being offered. So they're able to help you. Call the 1-800 number, and they're able to answer any questions that you maybe have. We also have a great sales team that is able to actually help answer questions. And they're not trying to sell you a product. They're just trying to find the product that works best for you. And so you're able to call either our customer service or our sales team in-house and have those questions. Also go to brokers and be able to answer the questions you may have. Yeah, our customer service team is second to none. They have a very quick and metrics related to answering. A lot of people don't want to sit on a call and wait and be on hold. They answer very quickly. They answer your questions concisely, and their goal is to answer your questions on your first call, so you're not having to call back repeatedly. So they're wonderful.
You've won multiple awards
Yes.
for this. You continue to win multiple awards for it. And this is an example I always like to use. When a lot of times people will call one of these national carriers or one of these call centers that's advertising, which we see all the time on television. You get, licensed brokers call, they'll help you, and you call and you ask a question like, what hospitals are in Kansas City, north of the river? And they're going, what river? You're not talking to somebody that really understands the market here. Okay, so, the same thing applies here. If you're out in Salina, or you're in Topeka, or you're in Wichita,
Western Kansas, very, very rural area.
That's critical. So it's important to know the state and know what's available there, and also how you marry up the providers to the program and all the rest of it. So that's critical, I think. So before we go to break, we got about 2 minutes left. You are in all counties in Kansas, all 103. And a lot of the carriers aren't, so address that right before we go to break here.
Yeah, just to clarify, we don't have Wyandotte and Johnson because Blue Casey has it.
Blue Casey
yes,
does.
but 103 of the 105, most of our competitors or the other carriers are not. They're only in certain areas. They tend to cherry pick areas. We're in the far, we touch Colorado. We go all the way to the frontier states, frontier side of the Kansas and the frontier part of our state. And so, it is a priority for us to serve all counties, regardless of whether or not it's a profit. We're a not-for-profit, mutually owned company. And so our focus is on serving Kansas, making sure we're improving health outcomes, reinvesting in our communities. And so it is a priority to be in all counties, regardless of what the margin is in that area.
That's one of the reasons why they're different. You know what I like to say about these local Blue Cross plans? They're Main Street. They're not Wall Street. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast. If you want information, you can go to the website BCBSKS.com. That's BCBSKS.com. The phone number, once again, if you want to call one of those lovely people at their customer service center, and they're happy to help you, 866-906-5253, 866-906-5253. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate here on the HIA Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. I want to do a shout out to KSAL 1150, our great affiliate up in Salina, Kansas. Very happy to be on the air there, and they're part of our family for America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting these shows out throughout Kansas in the area around Salina. So I want to welcome them. Again, a little shout out to all the folks up there. In studio with me, Misty Snodgrass. She is the director of ACA and Medicaid at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas, and we're talking all things ACA. We're going to do a little discussion about group here as well, but you heard in that last segment, now you're going to hear me repeat this, don't wait until the last minute. Open enrollment's going to start here. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but what you need to know is this is going to be a different year. It's going to be a tsunami. There's going to be massive displacement and other issues going on. Now's the time to get ahead of this if you're on an ACA. So let's just go through the dates.
Yeah.
Because it gets a little confusing for folks. So it opens up on November 1st. Then what happens?
Yeah, so you're able start selecting your plans, or even comparison shop. But as you said, start early. Don't wait until the end of December thinking that, I'm going to be able to be covered January 1. You need to be enrolled by December 15th to be covered by January 1st, or enroll by January 15th to be covered by February 1st. There are some special enrollment periods, but they're not the big special enrollment period that used to be there. So there are fewer events such as life events, moving, pregnancy, having a child. And so you really got to act now, and things are changing by the minute. And so stay up to date as to what's happening. We're doing our best to educate our members about what's coming down and what the changes are occurring. We're putting that in our renewal letters. We're also putting information out via social media and our website to make sure people understand what's happening, because there's been a lot of confusion, a lot of changes. And so make sure you stay on top of it, because you can't wait, because you're going to be delayed in your coverage, and it is a major disruption in the ACA market.
I cannot recall how many years when I was doing this, writing it, from the day they started, ACA, Obamacare, I've never seen anything quite like this.
Yeah. And Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas has been in market
you were
since
one
the
of
beginning.
You guys,
Yep.
Blue Cross of Kansas City,
Yep.
I think were the first carriers actually in the market, approved and up and running.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a lot of people left in 2017 and 2018, but not to the degree that is happening now, or the rate increases that are happening. And we've stayed the journey. Our focus is on serving Kansans, and so we're going to be here to stay even through all the turmoil. Do our best to educate our members.
Yeah, when you're 80 years plus, I think people can realize Blue Cross of Kansas isn't going anywhere, just so you understand. All right, so let's talk about 4 and 5 Kansans in the past found plans for like $10 a month or less. Yeah. And then that's going to change.
That is going to change.
Okay, so let's just start with that one and what's going to happen to the subsidy levels and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so you may or may not be aware, there were increased subsidies that passed with the American Rescue Act.
Up to 400%.
Exactly. And so there wasn't really a big cliff, the last few years post-COVID. However, those are set to expire at the end of this year. And if they are not renewed by Congress, then that's when more and more Kansans are going to be paying more and more. Like you said, $10 per month, it could jump to hundreds of dollars per month. It could, some estimates are it's going to increase by approximately 70% nationwide. So it's just going to be depending on what your income is, and also what subsidies you're eligible for. And so it's going to go back, if Congress doesn't act, to the original subsidies, which are between, 100 and 250% of federal poverty level. And so, make sure you're checking to see if you're still eligible for subsidies, because you may get a surprise, bill, if you're not aware of it.
So the other thing is self-affirmation. People being able to self-affirm, and that was allowed.
Yep.
It's not allowed now.
There's a lot of changes coming. You're going to
talk about some of that.
Yeah, and there's court cases actually on a lot of this stuff. So it's changing by the day. And
we talked about that off camera before the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so some of the things that you have to affirm that you are making a certain amount, you're now going to have to provide additional documentation. And so
tax returns.
Exactly. You're going to have to provide concrete documents to what your income is versus saying I do make this amount. And so there's a lot of changes coming. Make sure you're up to date with them. We're going to keep our members informed, because there's court cases now pending out there. There's decisions being made. So stay abreast of all the changes that are.
Yeah, and once again, if you this concerns you can give them a call. You can have a conversation just to understand what's happening or where you're going to go. All right. And then you'll understand what your choices are. If you're educated about what's going on, you can make a better decision. You can always call them at 866-906-5253. Like Misty said, they're more than happy to talk to you. All right, and just explain what's happening, because there are a massive number of changes coming in the marketplace. So what do you think is going to happen now when we see that coming in terms of the reduced subsidies, the increased costs, all the rest of it? It looks to me like a lot of people are going to start losing coverage.
I think that's a good possibility. We've estimated about 30% of Kansans, based upon the data, are going to lose their health insurance coverage because of the increased cost, as well as the potential subsidies going away. And so we're doing our best to keep our rates low. We're working on affordability. That is a top pillar of our company, to make sure that we can have, whether or not you're eligible for subsidies or the cost sharing reductions, we're actually prioritizing affordability. We're working on various programs to make sure that we are trying to keep our costs and our rates low, so that we can serve more and more Kansans. That's our ultimate goal, is to serve more and more Kansans.
And that's what you guys do really well, because you're focused on Kansas. You're not, and serving all 103 counties that you serve. And that's a significantly different task or goal rather than what we see from some of the national carriers, in the marketplace. So talk a little bit about as far as SEPs are concerned and qualifying events. Now we're going to go to break here in about 2 minutes, but if you've got, let's do that first.
Yeah. So, it used to be you could be able to sign up for, a special enrollment period year round, and that has changed. And so we're now only going to be available to have special enrollment periods for qualifying life events. So an example of a qualifying life event would be a job loss. We know a lot of people, especially in certain communities, are, there's layoffs occurring and they're going to the marketplace, ACA, going to healthcare.gov, or going to their local carrier's website and selecting a plan. And they are now only going to be able to do that for a job loss or for the birth of a child, or if they're moving into a different state. And so that's going to be a different thing, whenever you are able to do it much more broadly. It's only going to be during those certain types of events.
And they're narrowing it to that. And,
yes.
I'm going to guess, based on the fact that, the whole self-affirmation income thing and all the rest of it's changed, that you're going to have to be able to present documentation or show.
100%. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's more important than ever to explore what your options are and to get ahead of this before, there's a lot of confusion, or you're trying to figure this out the week of Christmas, to get covered, or the week
That's
before
probably
Christmas.
not a good time to be doing this.
No. No. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably not when you're trying to figure out how am I going to pay for all the Christmas presents I bought, okay, and everything else that's going on. Now I got to figure this out. Probably a good idea to get in front of this a little bit.
Yes, you need to start looking ahead now, having conversations with, a salesman, your brokers, your customer service teams to figure out what's happening, because it is really important to start getting a handle on what this is going to cost you.
Yeah, and this is going to hit a lot of Kansas, and you just heard Misty say they're anticipating 30% of the people being displaced in Kansas. And I've heard that from the CEO of Blue Cross of Nebraska, Blue Cross of Kansas City, and now you're sitting here listening to Misty, who's the director for ACA and Medicaid, say exactly the same thing regarding Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas. So there's a lot coming and a lot of changes coming. We'll be right back after the break. We're going to talk a little bit more about how some of this is going to work. We'll get in the weeds a little bit on some of the things that you need to understand moving forward about cost, benefits, and all the rest of it. And what are they offering at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas? We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. My producers today, Mr. Dave Thiessen and Garner Cowdery. In studio with me, Misty Snodgrass. She is the director of ACA and Medicaid. You can obviously tell this lady knows what she's talking about, all right? And this is kind of like drinking from a fire hose for a while you out there today. But the idea here is to bring information to you so you are prepared for what is about to happen. Because I've said this, on a couple of shows I've done up to now, and I'm saying it again today. These changes are going to be massive, and there's going to be a lot of panic in people about what do I do. So the last thing you want to do, as we've talked about, is wait, which is why if you call that customer service number at 866-906-5253, that's not a sales number. Those people are there to help you try to understand what's in the marketplace. They're not there to try to sell you something like some of these high-pressure sales outfits you see on television. Once again, 866-906-5253 or bcbskansas.com. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the plan differences, plan designs, and then specifically zero in on these silver plans and what we're going to see with these CSRs.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, because everybody's going to be shopping and it can be really overwhelming. I know whenever I've helped a lot of friends that have, what is the metal tier? What is this MOOP? What is this deductible? What are all these things meaning? And so I think it's really important to educate everyone on what the benefits they're choosing, because you may go to the lowest price, but is it giving you the most value? Is it going to be there when you need it? Is it going to be there when you're sick? Is it going to be there if you get a diagnosis? And so I think it's really important. One of the plans that we have is a high deductible plan. We are the only one that we know of in market that has a high deductible plan. So that gives members options for what to choose from. And these CSRs, those cost savings reduction plans, are able to help offset some of the costs associated with copays, co-insurance that might be able to be there. They're in the market in the silver plans. And so they're able to help individuals that have higher, specialist visits be able to help offset those costs.
What do they have to do to get enrolled in a CSR type program?
Yeah, so they're able to see if they're eligible. So there is some income eligibility for a CSR. So it's not available to everybody, but they are able to see if they're at a certain income level, whether or not they're eligible for those CSRs.
Is that between the 150 and 250 again?
Yep.
So basically, if you're in that category, this can make a big difference. But if you're not in that category, then you can't enroll.
That's right. And about 93% of Kansans are in a 100 to 250% in the ACA market. That's what it was last year. So we're hoping that a lot of individuals will be able to take advantage of them. They just may not be aware that they're available to them.
Yeah, and those are not necessarily available from a lot of these other carriers, including that high deductible plan we're going to talk about here in a second. So again, that's another reason to reach out and get some information. So let's talk about those high deductible plans, because as I said while we were on the break there, if you've got a house with 4 tricycle motors running around and, like my daughter up in Washington State, and she's at the ER or she's at the urgent care or at the primary care every week.
Yeah.
It's a weekly occurrence.
Yes.
They're all under the age of 8.
Yes.
Okay. And
they're on a scooter probably.
Thank you. Yeah. And so what she needs is very different than what somebody who's 55 or 60 needs. So talk about where do those plans, you said that earlier, the plan that's going to basically fit your need and fit your budgets. Talk about where do you see those plans and how do they work and how does that help people in the marketplace?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And everybody, that's the important part about shopping is what does it mean to you and your family? We can talk about what every one of these metal tiers are. So gold is great for individuals with chronic conditions or families with ongoing, needs, or those that just want that comfort of, I want to have a consistent premium. I'm not going to have a lot of, co-pays and co-insurance when I go to the doctor. So it's just kind of a peace of mind decision. Those silver plans are really available for those individuals that are doing cost saving and reductions, or those individuals that are on those subsidies. And so they're able to be kind of a more balance between the gold and the bronze. They're able to give you a little bit of more peace of mind, but they're going to have a higher deductible, or they're going to have a higher maximum out of pocket. And I think it's really important. A lot of folks are like, what's the difference between a deductible and what's the difference between a maximum out of pocket? Deductible is what you pay until the insurance kicks in, and then the maximum out of pocket is what you would pay. So if you have a $2,000 deductible, you're going to pay until that $2,000 amount. If you have a $10,000 maximum out of pocket, you're only going to pay a $10,000 for the entire year for your coverage. And so it's really important to see how frequent of a user you are. So if you're going to be a higher utilizer of healthcare, you're going to have a chronic condition, you might have cancer, you may have HIV, whatever your condition may be, you might be selecting a gold plan. It's going to provide you peace of mind and some consistency, that lower maximum out of pocket, that lower deductible. Those silver plans are kind of those balance, people that are healthy but may have some income restrictions, and so those are really great to be a balanced option. And then the bronze plan are available to be able to serve those that are kind of the healthy, those that are really
I don't need a lot of anything,
exactly,
but I need to know if I want it in a hospital, I'm not going to have a $150,000 bill.
Exactly, it's peace of mind. You're kind of buying peace of mind essentially with the bronze plan. So it's really great for healthy individuals. And so our high deductibles, we have them in multiple metal tiers. It's called our simple silver plan, and individuals are able to see if they want to select that high deductible plan, so that they're able to have those services covered at a certain level, but they want to have a lower price point in their premiums.
So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about formulary, because this gets missed. I remember when we had benefits by design, when people would come in for those appointments, please bring a list of your prescription drugs, and they'd be like, why? Because we want to make sure they're covered.
Yes.
Well, I have prescription coverage. You think you have prescription coverage. You may, if you're on Jardiance and your formulary doesn't cover Jardiance, you're paying for it. Well, you know what that copay is? I do, because my wife's on it. And before Medicare kicks in with the big deductible that's out there now, I was paying $400 a pop. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what it costs. So why is that important for people? And they need to ask those questions.
Your formulary, it's like one of those devil in the details, but no one goes to look at it. So you can actually go on healthcare.gov, or you can go on our website and find out what our formularies are and what's covered. And so we're very transparent with that. But there are different copays for different types of metal tiers and different types of plans. So if you're a chronic condition, you may have a $0 to $10 copay depending on, or even $20 depending on it. But the different tier levels are going to do that. But just because it says an amount in the tier level doesn't mean that it's going to be covered, or there's not going to be a ton of steps to get there. And so we really focus on trying to be probably more liberal with our formularies. That's a typical Blues way. We usually cover more things than our competitors, just because we also want to keep people healthy. We know that, prescription drugs are by far the highest cost of our benefit. And,
yes, they are.
But they are what also keeps some people healthy. And so we want people to take their medications to, whether they have diabetes or hypertension, because that ultimately keeps people out of the emergency room in the hospital. So, our goal is to help improve outcomes, but also help reduce the total cost of care. But you need to check and see if your medications are covered. You need to see if your PCP is covered, your primary care, because there are, you may think, oh, I'm going to go select this plan because it's the most affordable, but your primary care, the hospital of your choice, may or may not be covered. And so it's really important to look into that.
Well, and here's the thing, okay, we talked about some of the other carriers. You're the only one that's offering 103 counties. One of the biggest complaints that I hear, especially in Nebraska and Kansas, some other places, is people go on these other plans and they don't realize I live out in Hayes.
Yep.
I've got to drive 45 minutes to get to the primary care doc because it's not in Hayes.
That's right.
He's someplace else, or she's someplace else. So, and because Kansas has so many rural markets,
yes,
this is critical.
It's absolutely critical, especially in the far parts of the southwest and northwest part of our state. There is limited access to care. You want to make sure you have the provider of your choice that you want to go to, and make sure that your plan is covering that provider. And so it's really important to see who your primary care doctor is. And another thing that we're different is we want you to go to your primary care. We're not wanting you not to use your care. We know how important primary care is in managing health conditions, doing preventative screenings, referring you to mammograms, colonoscopies. And so it's really important. We encourage people to get their annual wellness visits, which not everybody does.
No, they don't.
They want you to not use their care. I'm actually looking daily to see who's not using our care, because we are trying to find ways to go get them engaged, because we know ultimately our folks stay with us for a while. Like you said, they'll go try out a no plan, maybe a little more cheaper, but they're going to realize there's going to be a lot more headaches and a lot more pain with it. And so they decided to come back to us, and they're like, you're kind of worry-free for us, but you might be a little bit more expensive, but we're working to do that affordability. We're hoping in the next couple of years that we're going to not only be the healthcare plan of choice, but we're the most affordable choice as well.
That's more what your mission is about. It's not about the quarterly earnings report.
No.
So
we have no shareholders.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's a little different. It's a little different approach, a little different way of doing things. If you want help, and we keep urging you to keep this in mind, write the phone number down, or look them up at their website, bcbskansas.com, or give them a call at 866-906-5253, 866-906-5253. When I come back from the break, we're going to switch gears now and talk to all you small employers out there about what you're going to expect to see on ACA and what those plans are going to look like. Stay right there. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. Stay there. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HI Radio Network. All our shows are posted on 16 podcast platforms and on our YouTube channel. We've got about 500,000 visits up there on that YouTube channel. We're getting a lot of play, and an awful lot of you are going to those podcasts. So thank you so much. And for all of you that listen on all 240 stations around the country, we appreciate all that too. So let's change topics a little bit.
Yeah.
So the people that have been hit the hardest are the small employers.
Yeah.
let's talk about what's in store for them this year.
Yeah, so we were actually able to hold our rates lower than our individuals, so that's exciting for us.
That's amazing, frankly.
So that's a big, so it's around a 7 to 9%, depending on kind of the plan. That's a significant improvement with our small group. That's been a priority for us. We're working hard to make it even more affordable. And I'll tell you a little story, Carrie. My dad has been a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas, policy holder. He's had a small business his entire life, and has been a Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas for over 40 years. And so it's a priority. I know how hard it is for small business owners to make that real expensive decision every month. So everything that we're doing and every decision we're making is how can we make it more affordable, because we want to be serving more and more small groups in our
and here's the thing. In addition to the fact that it's difficult for small employers, they have to deal with this. And by the way, 7 to 9%, that's the lowest increase I've heard in the country right now. And my ear is pretty close to the ground on a lot of this stuff. The other carriers are nowhere around there. So that's a big deal. But the other thing is, in addition to the cost, there's the issue of being able to hire good employees and the issue of being able to keep good employees. Yes. If you can't give people the second question they ask is, after what's my salary?
What's my benefits?
What are the benefits?
Yep.
Okay. Well, if you go in and hit people with 20 and 30% increases or cost shifting. Yes. Let's raise the deductible, raise the copays. Oh, and you're going to have to pay more than what you were paying as an employee because my contribution can't be as big. That disrupts the whole workforce.
Absolutely. It's just an important benefit. We all are passionate about having health insurance to be able to cover it for our individuals, our employees, and our families. And so we are really, really focused on that. It is a big, big bite out of every employer's budget. And
number two cost.
Yep, absolutely. Sometimes even number one, depending.
No, 100%.
Yep. Yeah. And so every time we're making decisions, I think of my dad, and every a decision he had to make on whether or not can give your employees raises because of whether or not costs are going up. So we're doing our best to make sure that we are preventing those significant rate increases. We also have other options for our members. A lot of the products are very similar to our individual market. So we have metal tiers. We have a lot of our employers are in gold. As you can imagine, they want to provide the most robust benefits, but that might not be what your employees may need depending on the age of your workforce. There's a lot of things that can factor in. So feel free to give us a call. We're happy to help walk you through that and find the plans that work best for you and your employees, or use a broker. If you're using a broker, I know a lot of small groups don't use brokers all the time, but sometimes they do. And if they're able to, just call. My dad has known his individual person that he's called to go get his quotes for 20, 30 years. I mean, our individuals and our employees stay forever, so they're very knowledgeable. They have relationships, which is a big thing, and they're working to fight hard to keep the lowest rates possible.
Yeah, and something you guys do is that if you are a small group employer, you can call and get direct help and directly enroll if you need to do that. So
Absolutely.
It's great. Talk a little bit about the level premium plans, and then how important is that moving forward for next year? Yeah,
we view our level funded as an opportunity for employers that want to manage their cost based upon their population that their employees that they have. And so we have a lot of level funded plans. They're very specific to the employer, so it's hard to give a lot of details just because of the complexity. We'll walk through what kind of history you guys have with your employees. So it's different than choosing an ACA small group plan where you're kind of group rated. That's kind of what a small group's your group. If you have kind of a younger workforce, it might work better for you, but it may not, depending on kind of the healthcare costs associated. So it's really important to reach out and find out if that's the best for you as an employer or your employees, and we'll be able to help you walk you through it, guide you. And it's not our folks don't get paid more because they put you in one sort of plan. It's really the entire goal is to help you get covered and your members to be covered.
And if they need somebody to come out and literally help them explain I know you guys do it.
Yeah.
You're not going to get there aren't a lot of other carriers that do that.
No one's coming into your office.
In fact, I don't think there are any, to be really honest with you. So to talk a little bit about that, because here's the employer trying to deal with what's going to happen next year with increases and changes. And then, typically in a small business, what I always found when we were doing this was The husband didn't do that. If the wife worked in the business, she was the one that handled. Yeah, so you're.
Yep, my mom was that. Yep, my mom was that. She helped with the accounting and stuff. So she was always looking at that, and she's helping to look at what's best for the employees. And so absolutely, we will come to your office gladly, and we will walk you through it. We will also, after, we don't just sit there and sell the product to you or try to get you on a certain product. We actually come back and have conversations. What's working? Here's what's going on. Here's some things. We want your folks to be going to make sure they're getting their annual wellness visits. Go encourage them to go get their annual wellness visits, because that helps you as an employer keep costs down low and also keeps your workforce healthy. We want to help with productivity, keeping your workforce healthy. And so it's really important to ask those questions. We will send people to your office, no matter if you have 5 employees or 500 employees. We really want to make sure that we're able to provide personalized service as well as details to help you answer your questions.
Very, very different approach.
Yes.
Extremely different approach typically than what people see out there, and a great way of doing business with what you guys do. Thank you very much for doing this today. I think like I said, I'm sure everybody listening was like trying to drink from a fire hose on this thing, but it's critical that people understand this. So you're going to come back.
I will.
When we're going to go through the actual plans on the next show. We're going to tell people, and here's why we're not doing it today. This is changing week by week. Not because of them, but because of what's going on the regulatory side, the legislative side, and all the rest of it. So the great news here is we'll have all that information. You'll be back to do another show with me.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming up today. She is Misty Snodgrass over at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas. You know, they have a very different way of doing business. You're with one of those national carriers out there. You might want to ask them when the last time was they sent a rep out to your shop to talk to your folks, okay? Probably didn't happen if I had to guess. Their focus is on the people in this state. You heard them say that, you know, they're doing everything they can to hold costs down. 7 to 9% on small group. I haven't seen that number anywhere else, period, across the country. So it's a very different way of doing business. As they like to say, it's Kansas helping Kansas. As I like to say, they're Main Street, they're not Wall Street. So they're very different at what they do. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I leave you with this thought from Albert Einstein. The one who follows the crowd usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been. Remember, friends, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the very best, you most often get it. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. Goodbye, America.